I'm Kara O'Donnell, and this is County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly deep dive into the actions taken by the Arlington County Board at its monthly meeting, as well as hot topics around our community. Today we're joined by County Board Chair Katie Crystal and Board Member Eric Gutshaw. Katie and Eric, thank you both for joining us today. Well, let's start off. We have been talking about the budget for the last couple of months now here on Board Rep, but we have now passed the budget. Let's talk about what actually transpired here.
Absolutely. So after 11 work sessions, many opportunities to have conversations with members of the community, a public hearing on the tax rate, a public hearing on the budget itself, and countless conversations among board members, we took an action last Saturday to pass our fiscal 19 budget. It wasn't an easy year. As you and others know, our projected needs are growing faster than our assessed property values. That opened up a gap this year, and it's opening up a bigger gap in the years to come. So I think while we were all cognizant this year of trying to balance the fiscal 19 budget, we were also doing so in mind of recognizing we're setting a lot of precedents here for how we have these difficult conversations and whether we will batten the hatches and do what we can to prepare for those long-term trends now or kick the can down the road. We tried to opt for the former this year.
And just kind of prepare things for later on.
Absolutely.
Now, the manager did propose a budget for all of you back in February, I believe. Did you pass that as is, or were there some changes along the way?
We did make some changes along the way. We did identify, rather, the manager helped identify a small pool of what are sometimes described as one-time money. It's different, of course, than ongoing money, and so you want to do different things with it. You don't, for example, want to fund salaries or add new FTE with one-time money. But it does mean that we can take on some priorities for the purposes of projects in fiscal 19. The best example of that, I think, and I know this is a priority for Eric as well as for me, is we restored some of the funding that the manager had proposed to cut to the Lee Highway Planning Study. That's a one-time project, but it is a project that will have reverberations for generations truly into the future. And we wanted to make sure there was sufficient funds to pay for a really robust planning study that could not only chart out what we envision for the corridor, but give us running room to explore some really innovative ideas about the future of Lee Highway and not feel constrained. So that's a place where we put some additional funding.
Now, I know we also had the issue of needing to generate some new funds, Metro, some additional funds for schools. Where did those things come from, and how did we make way for that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Well, the piece on schools is an important one, and I think really emblematic of what I was just alluding to. We're in the point where there's no more money to be found, right? Everything is hard choices and trade-offs. We were able to identify about $2.5 million additional in money, one-time money, for public schools by shaving back the planned renovation budget for the county office building. The Ellen Bosman actually recently dedicated county office building. The county received some pots of funds as a result of re-signing the lease for the next some years of this building. Some of that money was rent rebates, basically rent breaks for signing a long-term lease. That's money that had been programmed for the renovations to this building, to these workspaces, but also could go to the general fund or could go to schools. So we shaved that budget back by $2.5 million with the savings from it going to schools instead.
Okay. And how about for Metro? We did get a dedicated funding source for Metro, but that's an ongoing issue, as I think it always will be.
Absolutely. And I will say we have good news and bad news out of the General Assembly. The good news, in fact, the great news, is that we have a watershed moment of a dedicated funding source for Metro that has now been matched by the district in Maryland. It will be critical in Metro being able to get to and realize and sustain a state of good repair, which is essential. That's the good news. The bad news is where the money comes from. Unfortunately, with part of a regional coalition, we persuaded the governor and persuaded the state Senate that some modest tax increases on sources such as those visiting hotel stays in Northern Virginia should go to dedicated Metro funding. The partisan majority in the House of Delegates did not accept that, and instead where this dedicated funding will be coming from is localities like Arlington will be on the hook to pay in about $8 million more on top of the $75 million we already pay from Arlington County, and major cuts to our regional funding for road and transportation projects. impacts. So we'll be seeing the impacts of that through opportunities foregone or delayed, and we'll see more of it during our capital improvement planning process, which kicks off next month.
We also had a few items that were on the list to be reduced significantly that you actually put back into play after hearing a lot of those public comments. What are some of those?
Well, I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention the shredder, right? We spent tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was, and it really shows how the process can work. It's really important that we hear from the community and what matters to them. And frankly, we heard from quite a few folks that the service offered by the county, while I don't think any of us on the board really felt this was an essential core government function, it was a piece of equipment that we already owned. And so to just keep it going for the life of that equipment for a few more years, hopefully, we restored that money, a small amount of money to the budget because we heard from folks that it was important. Similarly, on something that is sort of larger scale, we heard from a lot of folks from Arlington independent media. There was some rather significant cuts that were proposed. And again, this is a transitional kind of budget, right? We are moving into an era of more constraints, as Ms. Crystal just very adequately just described. And so I think that's how we looked at the issue with Arlington Independent Media, is that there are some structural changes that are happening that the organization will need to adapt to, but we didn't ultimately feel it was appropriate to sort of leave them in a lurch, if you will. So we are going to continue to work with them and come up with a transition plan where they will be sustainable on into the future. It's an invaluable service. They are best community independent media in 10 years running, recognized nationally, so we wanted to do that. There's was also, we restored money for planning for Lee Highway. That is the Lee Highway corridor, the civic associations in the community, the business community along the corridor there have spent years in the making getting ready for a major planning initiative there. And we on the board wanted to make sure that was going to move forward with the full depth and breadth of the scope that was originally envisioned. And so we were able to restore most, not all, but most of the money for that, and we're looking forward to that effort.
And as we move forward, I think the word of the day for the next few years, in fact, is going to be austerity in terms of our budgets. That this is going to be the way we need to approach things for a little while.
I think to some extent that's right. Although one of the things I mentioned in my final comments as we pass the budget is I wouldn't actually consider this budget, a conservative or austere one. I would describe it, I think, as sustainably progressive.
Okay.
We are continuing to invest in the core values in Arlington County. We're continuing to invest in the people that make this one of the best educated, best policed, and best supported counties in America. There are raises for our public safety. There are significant raises for our teachers. There are continued investments in some of the challenges that face our community, whether it's child care affordability or the opioid crisis or mental health needs. I think it's really important for us to emphasize we're not backing off of our core commitments, but for a long time we have measured the strength of those commitments in terms of dollars invested, and I think it's important that we enter an era where we start measuring our commitments in terms of outcomes achieved. And that really is going to be the watchword for the coming years. How do we maintain what we value in Arlington County and get smart about measuring it and making sure we're achieving it, and not just assuming that that big dollars equal the values we've come to see.
Right. Okay, well, another thing the board voted on at this pass is to hold public hearings coming up next month, actually, and to vote on the 4 Mile Run Valley Plan. Let's take a step back. We haven't talked about that for a little while, and remind folks what the 4 Mile Run Valley Plan is really all about. What encompasses this?
So the 4 Mile Run Valley Plan, and it is a mouthful, is this is the area surrounding Jenny Dean Park. It's bordered by Shirlington and the Knox community. And it's an area where we have not only Jenny Dean Park, we've got the dog park, the much beloved dog park down there right on 4 Mile Run. We also have, there's some of the last remaining large contiguous zone of industrial use. And we don't really have in Arlington the heavy industrial use anymore, but we certainly have some of the lighter industrial uses, a lot of auto body and car service facilities down there. And it's also been, though, growing and thriving and changing, and with businesses that surround the dog park that are focused on canine services. There's a new brewery down there, so there's a lot happening there. And so this is an opportunity. We're very excited to have to hear this next month. A major plan coming forward after a multi-year process and a citizen-led working group that has wrestled with some of the issues of what is the vision, the long-term vision, what can we do to incentivize the things that we want and to work on the issues that we need to resolve, like parking, for example. And it's a great opportunity. The plan will lead the county's investment in infrastructure in that area. So we're looking forward to a fulsome discussion next month. There are a few things that are still up for discussion, namely the configuration of Jenny Dean Park and a few other things. But mostly, the plan is coming together quite nicely.
What are you hearing so far? Is it more to keep the character and kind of the old school, for lack of a better way of putting it, of the industrial feel of that neighborhood? Is there desire for change? Is it a little bit of both? What are we hearing?
I think it's probably a little bit of both is what we've been hearing. But mostly what I think we've heard from folks is they don't fundamentally want the feel of the neighborhood to change. So it is about keeping the character, but to allow it to evolve perhaps in a different direction. So for example, in the business district, we are looking at part of the framework will be to develop some tools to encourage and incentivize an arts district. And that doesn't mean nothing is going to be mandated. There won't be any changes in terms of what can be done, only just some new tools to allow for other things to be done. And then with respect to the residential neighborhoods, I think there was a strong desire to, they love the park, but there's always an opportunity to really make it even more welcoming, more update some of the amenities, and make sure that that everyone, there's a little something for everyone, and everyone in the community can be a central gathering place and a center of the neighborhood where people can gather and just enjoy Arlington and all it has to offer.
I think that's right. And it's remarkable. Sometimes we pass plans that are truly transformational. And with regard to the planning of this corridor, this is not a transformational plan. And I think that really came out of a lot of conversation and a lot of realization of exactly what Eric said, which is that people value the kind of creativity and spontaneity that you can get in our last significant industrial area of the county. The opportunity to think about what old warehouses can be used for. And in a county where rents have gotten very high for commercial and retail as well as for residential, I think people have really come to love and appreciate some of these more creative industrial spaces. And so, everything else that will come in the plan, I think really shakes out of that statement of values that we want to keep what's valued about 4 Mile Run.
Okay, we will wait to see what happens at the public hearings. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the board's approval of a redevelopment in Buckingham that's going to include some much-needed affordable housing. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly roundup of important actions the board takes at its public meetings. We're taking a look at the April meeting today with County Board Chair Katie Crystal and County Board Member Eric Gutschall. Now let's jump right in. The board approved some redevelopment to the Buckingham area, and this was not without a little bit of controversy. Let's talk about that one a little bit.
Absolutely. So this is a project that will happen on the site of the former Red Cross building that has been vacant. It's a project to raise that old building, preserve the historic garden apartments on the site, but introduce a 4-story multifamily building, which will bring about 97 units of committed affordable housing to this area. So, many of our development projects, market rate or otherwise, are not without controversy. Folks worry about the impacts to their neighborhood. Sure. They worry about the impacts of more people. Often that takes the form of concerns about traffic and transportation, school capacity, and so forth. So we spent some time really digging digging into those issues, gave staff, for example, some direction. We hope that we have asked them to please continue to work with both the developer and the Virginia Department of Transportation, because this is right off Route 50, to ensure that some of the feared impacts to circulation won't come to pass.
Now, we're always talking about ways to find affordable housing around Arlington. It's a continuing issue. How do you encourage developers to really get on board, for lack of a better way to saying it, with including affordable housing units along with the market rate units in a project?
Well, we're fortunate to have a number of partners, and Wesley Housing Development Company is one of them. Wesley Housing Development Corporation is one of them, which are nonprofit developers. Their mission is to develop committed affordable housing. And so that means that they are out of the gate ready to be partners with us. It is true, however, that one of our major tools to incent this kind of development is by providing gap financing, which is the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, or AHIF. And it's true that the AHIF is seeing increasing pressure. That's a great thing. It means there are far more projects contending for gap financing, great projects that we'd love to support. But whereas in years past we might see them come in with a request for $5 or $6 million, there are now huge opportunities to acquire large parcels, build more committed affordable units, requesting closer to, say, $20 million from our AHIF. So even though last year, for example, in our budget, we reached record highs of general fund contributions to the AHIF, we can't keep up. So this project is a great example. It really has been kind of shaped and sculpted to be competitive for AHIF monies, but cognizant of some of those limitations. It will hopefully bring in other sources of funding. The AHIF is really designed to leverage low-income housing tax credit, private financing, and other sources of money in the achievement of units like the 97 that we'll see in this building.
Okay. Well, the board also took action to really help to preserve and restore some of our natural resources, as well as redeveloping commercial resources, with honoring some outstanding park volunteers and notable trees. Tell me about this.
Well, this is one of the, I think one of the more fun parts of being on the board, is that you get to recognize some volunteers that really is what makes Arlington great, because it's all of the tremendous numbers of volunteers, and obviously we can't give special recognition to every single volunteer, but it's nice to be able to take the time to recognize a few folks. And what we were able to do this month was we recognized a volunteer, sort of one who helped to take care of some of our recreational fields, who had led a citizen-based group to make sure that some of our diamond fields were ready after rainstorms, ready to go for play. I don't know. I'm not sure if we play baseball in the
I know, but it just
winter,
seemed like we got the snow so late that.
But given this year that's true. And then we also recognized a volunteer who had done a lot to encourage natural spaces and the preservation of natural space and the development of trees. And so, and that's where the Notable Tree program comes in. We had several notable trees that were designated. This is a program whereby any citizen in the county can nominate their tree to be designated as a notable tree. You get a little plaque, and what it does is it provides a modicum of protection for that tree on into the future, but mostly it's your way of saying, I'm very proud of my tree, and this is something that I would like to see continue to exist on into the future.
What is the criteria for having a notable tree in one's backyard?
Well, the criteria is available on our website, so you can search for that. What it essentially is it has to do with the species, the size of it, the age of it, the health of it. So if you think you have a really awesome tree, you just apply for designation. Our urban forester will come out to the property, will visit the tree and evaluate it, and let you know if it's suitable for designation.
Okay. And this is something Arlingtonians really cherish.
Yeah.
Green space, tree canopy,
Trees.
that kind of thing. This is something that's always been very important to our community. Do you see a lot of folks, consistently saying, I really want to get involved in these kind of volunteer efforts specifically to protect our parks, green space, what have you?
Absolutely, right? We have a really robust urban forestry commission that advises us on the future of our tree canopy. We have a citizen advocacy group, the Arlington Tree Action Group, ATAG, that's recently been stood up or comprised to advocate for these efforts. And then we have spectacular volunteers, our master naturalists, for example, who are out in the community. And actually, we'll be needing more of those volunteers because another action that we took was to accept a federal grant to plant 1,000 seedlings along 4 Mile Run Stream in Banneker and Bluemont Park. So the other end of the tree life cycle, every notable tree started as a seedling, right?
That's right.
A lesson for us all. And we'll be looking for volunteers to help us get involved in planting some of those 1,000 seedlings so that Arlington's tree canopy can continue to grow.
It's like the proverb, right? When's the best time to plant a tree? 60 years ago. When's the next best time? Today.
Yep, there you go. And then to wrap up, we also are talking about also a way to get outside via Capital Bike Share, and we're kind of made some really interesting strides here with the ability to add some bike share stations, specifically at Teddy Roosevelt Island and Gravelly Point. Everybody loves these spots.
That's right.
What was it that was so important about getting some bike share stations there at those locations?
Well, this is really exciting. It's a memorandum of understanding between the county and the National Park Service, and it will let us establish capital bike share facilities at Teddy Roosevelt Island and Gravelly Point. And what is so fabulous about this is that it improves use of the trails, right? They're major trail connection points, and it improves the accessibility of these sites for tourists and visitors as well as for Arlingtonians. This is, bikes at their best. Help people enjoy the outdoors. It makes public spaces more accessible to them, and it gives them alternative forms of transportation, and that's exactly what these projects are designed to do. So, these places are national treasures. They are a place to explore nature and to visit with our national history, to experience the sort of awesome sight of planes landing in very low in the case of Gravelly Point. And having these bike share facilities will make it all the more accessible to our residents to do all of those things.
And these are both kind of right along that Mount Vernon Trail, which kind of hugs the shoreline of the Potomac. So, I always tell people best place to see the cherry blossoms is right there by riding the Mount Vernon Trail and get kind of that wide angle view. But it's a good connector. I mean, these areas are easy transit points to have the bike share stations there. We should note, still not able to ride bikes on Theodore Roosevelt Island as a national park site, but
I believe that's correct,
yes.
Right? Yeah, that's the National Park Service policy, so that's maybe one for continued conversation.
But to get there, then park the bike, and then when you're ready to leave, grab another bike, off you go.
Which is the beauty of Capital Bike Share, exactly.
Now, for bike share efforts, this is something we're continuing to really promote and increase around
That's
the county.
exactly right. And I think one of the things that we found so powerful about the bike share is that it solves what we sometimes describe as the last mile problem, right? Folks, the transit will get you most of the way to your destination, but if you're looking for a truly kind of customized door-to-door, bike share can really help close that gap. And these are great examples, right? That you might be able to get somewhat close to these treasures on Metro, and it's bike share that will help you get the last of the way. And we know that's true not only for places to recreate, like these National Park Service sites, but for places of work and where people live as well.
Okay.
The really neat thing is that, this is the nexus of where Arlington is the #1 entry point for tourists into the state of Virginia. And of course, these sites, the National Park Service sites, are a big draw. So what we're doing is this is a way of saying, hey, come on into Virginia, because now you come here, get on a bike, and explore the rest of Arlington, explore the rest of the Mount Vernon Trail. So it's really a win-win.
Great. Well, we'll see how folks use these bike stations and the many others throughout the summer months here as we get into the big visitors season. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our April County Board wrap-up. I hope you'd enjoyed our chat with the County Board Chair and our guest board member about the key decisions the board took this month, the decisions that affect you, your family, and our community. Remember, all county board meetings are open to the public and they're live streamed and archived on our website. Just go to arlingtonva.us and search County Board. And always tell us what you think about these issues and more by going to topics.arlingtonva.us/engage. I'm Kara O'Donnell, and I'll see you next month right here on County Board Wrap Up.